Tracy. So welcome everybody today. I'm going to give you an introduction to the MRP and some tips and tricks you can take away and use in your purchasing. So the agenda today, we're going to cover MRP, Materials Resource Planning. We're going to do some inventory planning settings, an overview of that, some purchase order tips and tricks, and we'll briefly talk about just-in-time purchasing and how that works in SAP. So let's get rolling. So first thing you have to do is close your Outlook window. Second thing you have to do is close this down. Sorry guys, I thought I closed my team view already. Okay. So MRP, if you're not familiar with it, you have everything in your system. You're starting to use your sales orders and your purchasing, and you have information flowing into the system. So the next step is to use the MRP wizard. The MRP wizard allows you to take all that information and bring it together and start to put some intelligence to your purchasing process. So the MRP wizard is available from the sidebar here under the MRP wizard, and it brings everything together and runs you through the different scenarios that you want to run in order to get information out. So in this case, I'm going to do an extremely basic example because we're just limited for time, and I'm going to give some quick examples of the functions and an overview. The system and the MRP system is much more detailed and can be run for various different things, including bombs and more for production. I'm just going to kind of run through the different scenarios so you can kind of take it away, think about it, and just so you know the various things we can do and then customize it to your own system. So I've done just a basic MRP run. You can have different scenarios to run it for different types of products or different time horizons. You have a scenario detail page with the name. I'm going to do it just for 6 months by the month. So you could do this by day, by week, and I'm going to include production and purchasing items. In this case, again, because it's extremely simple and I want to control all the variables, I have elected to select one single item. And the one single item will just keep things simple and we can focus on that particular item. But you can run it based on a specific item, a specific group of items, or you can tag a specific property, or you can manually add items into this list in order to come up with the scope of the particular MRP run. So from here, you want to see a couple of different things. Once you're entering things into the system, you have your item master data, you have your sales documents, you have your purchasing documents. So you've probably started using, well, you'd have to have started using the item master data, but there are a few other things to note. So in the inventory data, you're going to have warehouse minimum inventory levels. So this is kind of the next step. And again, once you have information flowing into this, yes. Yes.
I'm just getting notice here from some of the guys. I think we're going to have to start this one over. We're just on your auto task.
Oh, well, that's not not good. Uh-oh, sorry guys.
Could you start it over?
Yep, I'll restart.
I'll stop my recording and I'll start it over again. I'm sorry about this.
I shared the main screen, but my bad.
There you go.
Oh, it switched my screen to screen 2. Darn it. Sorry about that. So thank you, Tracy. The point of this webinar is to give you an introduction to the MRP system and to give you some tips and tricks you can take away for your purchasing process. So the agenda today, let me just make sure my screen is showing the right screen. I have no way of checking. So the agenda is we're going to cover the MRP, the materials resource planning. We're going to cover inventory planning settings and an extension to your item master data and some more specific setup things that will help you with the MRP. We are going to do purchase order tips and tricks, and I'm going to very quickly talk about just-in-time purchasing. Okay, so we want to log in here, and we are going to, once you start to get into the system, you will be entering sales documents, you'll be entering purchase documents, you'll have information flowing through the system, and you will then want to start to get more intelligent about your purchasing. So the MRP Wizard lays over top of that information, your inventory data and your sales data and your purchasing data, and it brings it all together and applies some logic to it and helps you to automate the different purchasing methods that you're using. So we're going to jump into the MRP Wizard here, and as long as you have some item master data information, some sales information, some purchasing information, you can start to get into the MRP Wizard right away. There is inherently no additional settings that you have to do, but I'm going to talk about a few settings that will help you to get more out of your system. Okay, so the MRP Wizard here is, I'm going to run a very simple scenario just to make sure that I can control all the variables, but you can set up and use the MRP for a lot of different scenarios, and it's much more deep than what I'm going to go into today. I just want to run something simple, give you an overview so you can take it away and start thinking about applying the MRP to your own processes. So I'm going to use the MRP Run, which is the one that I've kind of crafted for today's webinar, and I'm going to carry on with that. So this is the scenario details. I'm running it for 6 months out. You can run it month by month. You can run it per week or per day if you want it even, and I'm going to select my items. In this case, again, just to keep it very simple, because the MRP is quite complex, you can add all the items in the system, you can do selected items, you can add items from a specific group, you can add only specific items, and you can add it from an item property, or you can expand the selection criteria and then select specific items to be purchased. So if there are different types of items that you're purchasing, you can run through them and filter it for specific procurement items, and then you could do kind of consumable items, or you could do it by vendor, or you could do it for different scenarios that make sense for you in the methods that you're doing. You don't have to run it for all items at all times. So another thing to pay attention here is the item master data. So if you're using the system and you're doing your sales and purchasing already, you have to use the item master data, but there's a couple of pieces of information that will help you to get more out of your system here. So the inventory tab will allow you to set a minimum inventory level, and this is kind of the first way that you're going to get into the MRP. If you had something just like a safety stock level or a minimum inventory level, I'm going to show you how you can take that into consideration, and that's a good kind of first step into the system. The second piece here is your planning tab, and your planning tab sets up your planning method. In this case, because I'm using this item, it's purchased by the MRP, and the procurement method is buy. So I'm going to show you just a buy type item, but you can also use a production type item. And if a particular item is not relevant to the planning method of MRP, you can actually turn it off, so then it will just never be involved in the MRP as well, kind of keeping things nice and clean when you're running your MRP Wizard. You can control your order intervals, your order multiples, how many you have to buy at once, minimum order quantity, and the system will consider all these things. You can also have lead times, and you can have tolerance days. So tolerance days just allow you to let the MRP be a little bit more tolerant, and it will, instead of saying like you have to order one today and then one next week, if you put something like 7 days, it'll say, well, let's just group some of these orders in. It may cause some of your sales order delivery dates to be off, but it will allow you to consolidate them. So you can always go back and look and compare your purchasing to your sales documents, and if, say, a salesperson has gone through and kind of just, bypassed the availability check, you can modify those delivery dates with the customer before anything arrives. So I will show you the item availability check too, so that's a side note. So the item selection here has been selected and items have been checked. Again, my scope is very limited today just because I wanted to give you an overview more of, about what the MRP Wizard is and not kind of run through the very specifics of a whole bunch of items. So you can run through here and you can select by the company level, and now with 9.2 you can do this at the warehouse level. So in my demo system here, it is just basically at the company level because I only really have one warehouse, and that makes it very simple, but there are a lot of different settings here, and you can design it so that you can run it for warehouse 1, warehouse 2, and so forth to allow you to do those things. In the document data source, we're going to select the documents relevant to this particular run. So I have just done true supply, which is purchase orders. I'll do true demand, which is your sales orders. And then in this case, I'll do true production, which is not relevant to that particular item. But in the case, I usually run it for those 3 things. But you can take into account a lot of other things if it makes sense for your scenarios. And you can also restrict or remove maybe particular unusual projects, or a large container order, or something here that you just don't want to see in this MRP run at all. Maybe something's throwing things off, so you can get rid of those. You can now see the inventory level here has the ability to show minimums. So again, as your first kind of step into the system, if you set some kind of safety stock minimum levels, you can come back through here. If you do purchasing weekly, you can kind of fire MRP Wizard up on a Monday. Just run for the, sorry, sorry guys. We just run this for a minimums, and then the minimums will just select for the basic stock levels, and you can just kind of skim through that and even just leave off the sales orders and the purchase orders in order to replenish your minimum levels. And then maybe the next step would be to include some supply and demand. So you can kind of experiment with this. You don't have to do anything with it once it makes its recommendations, and I'll show you that once we get to order recommendations. So yeah, an easy way to get into it, just summarize, just use minimums and then kind of expand your scope, and once you get a little bit better with it, you can use all these different options, but don't let it kind of scare you off. Another thing is the forecasting. I would say this is kind of the 3rd step. So first step might be minimum replenishment, second step would be some supply and demand, and the 3rd step, when you're getting really fancy, is you can use some forecasting, and you can either import this from Excel or you can generate it directly from the system. So I'm just choosing a 2017 forecast, pop this open here. I've done this by the month, and I've just selected my item. I haven't put anything in here. But if you had information in here, or maybe this was a continuing forecast and you just want to use last year's forecast and you'd already done it for seasonality, you can increase it by a percentage. Maybe you're projecting a 10% increase in growth for this particular class of items. And now with 9.2, you can actually generate the forecast using some simple math here. So simple average or just monthly history. And you can work through that, and it'll suggest what you're going to need based on the particular date range you've selected. But again, this can be imported through Excel. If you have particular seasonality calculations and you want to do some massaging of the data, maybe some things you want to control. People love their Excel, so don't be don't be afraid. You could do that outside and then import it as well. So these are the tools for forecasting. I'm just going to turn that off again. I'm trying to keep things extremely simple here. Okay. So we've basically, actually the last thing I want to talk about here is you can also incorporate inventory transfer requests. So this recommendation I've done at the company level. So I'm going to generate it as my order recommendations are going to actually be purchase orders, but you could generate these as purchase requests if you wanted. It's something that allows you to have more control over it. The purchase requests do not impact the supply calculations for particular items, so that might be one reason why, but you can still control the order recommendations and then generate purchase orders too. But it'll also allow you to check the box for inventory transfer requests if I was doing an MRP run by warehouse, because if you do it by warehouse, it could potentially say, well, warehouse 2 can just take some of the stock from warehouse 1 and it doesn't violate any of the rules for minimums or required levels. So keep that in mind too. I'm going to run this. So again, keeping very simple here, my MRP item expanded here. I can see, and if you remember from this item, I have a 300 minimum, and right now I only have 225 in stock. So if you look here, it wants to buy 75, and there's also 50 for a sales order. So you can see in the horizon here the various months and the suggestions. So it's saying buy 125 on this date, and then buy 100 in June here. And that will give you the running average here so that you will have your 225 now, you have 50 plus your minimums, and then in June you can buy another 100 because the lead time is not too long. And you can click on these various sections to see where the data is pulling from. So I can see the POs and I can see the sales orders. So this would also net with the existing POs, and it would give you all the information you need, and then you can see it ends up leaving us with our 300 count quantity for our minimums, keeping us at that safety level that we want to keep for this particular item. So if there were multiple items, obviously this would be much more complicated. It will indicate in red if you will not be able to meet the due date, and there's a whole bunch of extra things there. And if you want more information or a guide for this, you can contact us and we can provide you an SAP manual on the MRP. And you can filter for possible problems, which will just filter for items that you will not be able to make it based on the lead times, and then you could potentially contact the supplier in order to have things expedited. So the recommendations here, it's very simple. It's going to do the first 125 and then the second 100, so I can save my recommendations out of here. In that case, it was just saying I already had recommendations. You can open up your order recommendations, and you can see these are the recommendations it's saying. You can switch vendor codes. You can switch, if unit prices change based on their price list. You can switch quantities. You can switch this to be a purchase request or a quotation instead of a purchase order. So you can send out a bunch of quotes for a particular class of item instead of having it actually generate the orders. In this case, I'm going to be make it again very simple and just create them. One new purchase order was created. I'm going to pop open my PO here, and you can see this was generated from the origin of MRP. And that's basically it. So the order recommendation allows you to kind of work through things. You can export that to Excel, massage some of the information if you wanted. You can work on screen. You can buy some of the things. You could do some as quotes. You can combine some things and not combine some things. You don't have to combine these particular into one document either. I just had that. I don't know if it's going to let me open this again. You don't have to combine it into one PO either. From the order recommendations, you could have generated two separate POs. Some vendors don't necessarily read the specific things as carefully as possible, so you could split those and send them into different POs if you wanted. Or you could change the horizon of your MRP to be shorter just for, month by month depending on your lead time. So it's very customizable. So with the PO, a couple of little tips here is you can use a BP catalog number by the vendor. So this is something that is a bit new. And maybe you're using the purchasing data and you're using the manufacturer's catalog number, and this isn't the same as the vendor's BP catalog number. So I can right-click on item master data and select business partner catalog numbers, and you can see that if I had picked this vendor, which I did, it knows that that BP's catalog number for this particular item is slightly different than mine. And if I had multiple vendors in here, I could select it that way and have a little bit of different information per vendor, so when I go to order I can search by their information right in this BP catalog number the same way I can search under my item number. So I could actually look at their catalog, I could type in ABC1234 and it knows that that's my MRP item 1, and that makes things a little bit easier. Secondly, you can have multiple preferred vendors. If you click this select preferred vendors, you can see I only have the one here, but you could have multiple and you can see what price list they're being applied on, the item price list that they're giving you based on this price list, and also the last purchase price from that particular vendor. Then you can also set which vendor will be your preferred vendor from this screen. You know, if one vendor is giving you a better price or a better discount, then you can manage that way. But you can see very quickly using this ellipses button who would give you the best price. And maybe if you needed an alternative or one vendor is out of stock, you can switch that to view another vendor. Another little tip here is you can right-click in the row. Actually, you can right-click here and you can pick last prices, and this will give you all the last prices from the POs and other documents that you have in this list. So you can uncheck from this particular vendor, and you can just select your the PO that you want and then reset this to refresh, and then it will show you the information just for those particular items, and you can see what previous prices you would have gotten, and that will allow you to maybe compare or say, well, you gave me this price before, can we get the same price? Or maybe you would see it coming from another vendor, maybe you had a good price from them and maybe they've changed their prices. So the last prices report is really useful. So the other thing I wanted to show quickly is the printout for Crystal Reports. I put here the item code, I showed the vendor's item code, and I also showed the vendor requested date. So you can say this however you want. If you want to make this very clear on the row, if the vendor will accept multiple rows of the same item and they're also organized enough to ship you this properly, then you can just change it with Crystal Reports to have the printout reflect this in the row, and hopefully that will make your purchasing a little bit easier. So the last couple of things I want to talk about is the minimums alert. So out of the box we have a minimum stock deviation alert. So that's from modules, administration, alerts management. And then just find this minimum stock deviation. And this is something that you would have right now, and you can activate it and set who you want to be notified internally. And what's going to happen is as soon as an item goes below the minimum stock, then it will alert your purchaser. In this case, you could just check who you want, and then that could be a good way to get them to go and check into the MRP wizard and run it just by minimums. You know, and then if you have a couple minimums in there, it'll let you get your feet wet, and then you can start expanding to using the MRP a little bit more as you start to understand it. So that's built in today, and you could turn that on today and walk out of here and get the benefit of that. The second thing I want to talk about, it's a topic that people bring up. It's just-in-time purchasing, because not everybody stocks everything all the time, and you don't really want to. So if you were going to buy this MRP item on a sales BOM, or a sales order, sorry, and we say wanted to buy 1,000 of this, it's going to warn us with this item availability check, because the system knows that there are not enough purchase orders in the system, and there may be too many sales orders. The availability, it will not let you do this. So you're running up against the availability check, but what you have here is the ability to just purchase this with a procurement document right from the sales order. So if this is something, you know, it's a special order item, you don't want to stock it, you got an availability warning, you're like, I just want to just buy this one just in time for this particular order, you can show the columns for allow procurement document, and we can rename this to something like make PO. And then you could just check the box here. When you add this particular order, it's going to prompt you to make a PO right away to the default vendor, and then you can send that off. And then when this is actually created, you'll see in the relationship map the linked just-in-time PO, and also once it's created, it'll show you the PO in the procurement document column here as well. So that allows you to do just-in-time purchasing. You don't have to do this order by order. You can select this box and just move ahead, and you could go back and also do your procurement based on the procurement confirmation wizard. So potentially you could do a bunch of sales orders, just check the box that you need a PO made from this, and then come back to the procurement confirmation wizard and then consolidate the orders as well. So you can do this right from a particular sales order, or you can just indicate it on the sales order. So that's kind of a very quick overview of the just-in-time system. So what did we cover today? We covered MRP, materials resource planning. We covered a bit of the inventory planning settings like the minimum inventory, the lead time and stuff. And again, the steps, kind of like getting your feet wet with the MRP. Start with the minimums. The minimums are an easy way to do that. Kind of phase 2, bring in some supply and some demand, and maybe a specific class of items that you reorder on a standard basis. And then phase 3, get a little bit better. You could do multi-warehouse, you could do forecasting, and use some of the built-in tools for that. We talked about the purchase order tips and tricks. That's vendor BP catalog numbers. You can look at the last prices report, and you can customize your printout to make it extremely clear for your vendor if they need to see specific things. Or again, you could split the POs from the order recommendation of the MRP. Don't forget about the alerts for the minimum inventory and also the procurement just-in-time. So anything that you need or any expansion on these particular topics, just contact Tracy directly and she can get you in touch with consultant. If you work directly with me, you can contact me and I can answer more questions about this. And if you would like the MRP user guide, we do have an MRP user guide as well, so Tracy can give that to you. So
Mike,
I
I've got a
will
question
pass that
for
back
you.
to you.
The MRP user guide, because I have, I just got my hands on SAP B1 to go version 9.2, and I have 9.1 for everyone. If you prefer the older one, I don't know if everyone's on 9.2 yet, but is the MRP guide in that?
No, the MRP guide is extremely detailed into the MRP processes.
Could
so
you send that to me? You have it?
Yeah,
You have that
yeah,
document?
I will absolutely, yeah.
Great.
And so the MRP Materials Resource Planning Guide, it just kind of like breaks down a little bit more of the calculations and goes over more of the fields in detail. I'm sure that like the Business One 2Go will have a little bit of information and overview of it, but the MRP guide will go into it ad nauseum.
Great. So if you send that to me, I'll send that to everybody. I'll send you guys the MRP guide and the SAP B1 to go, which is, it's the basic SAP user guide, so it covers pretty much all the modules. And so that's that. What else did I want to show? Yeah, show us the support desk, Mike. So for those that aren't used to coming, you've got your support. If you have any other questions, if you're dealing with Mike, you can deal with him. But you also have your support desk there if you need help. And 2 more things that I wanted to mention. We've got a SAP B1 user guide that came out in December, and it's an ebook, and you can buy it from the website. I think you've got it on your last page, Mike. Yeah, you see the website down there? So you can get this. This is really a very detailed user guide that's available. And we have printed copies at the office, so just send me an email if you want one. And finally, we've got an unadvertised rebate that ends today for SAP B1 licenses. So if anybody needs licenses, you get a 10% discount from SAP. It ends today, at the end of the day. So if you need any information on it, just let me know. And we're going to be about 3 weeks without any webinars because we've got Easter. So I think our next one's going to be on the 21st. So I'll be sending those out. We'll be covering inventory on just a second here. We're going to be covering pricing structures. So if anyone has any questions, you can just send me an email. And were there any other questions?
I would have one little small question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. In the item master data, the planning method, all my items are at none. That has to be changed, I think, for all my items to be able to use the MRP, right?
Yes. Yeah, you can, and yeah, definitely you could just use the data transfer workbench. Okay. And so if you're like a do-it-yourself type person, we can send you. I have a tutorial video on how to do that. If you would just like some help, then we can do it for you. It's very simple. All we need is basically an Excel spreadsheet saying what the item code is, and then we'll just switch this flag, and we can just run through an update in the background, and it'll change them all, or whichever ones or whatever classifications you want very quickly.
Okay, I would do them all. I have over like 160,000 SKUs, so I don't feel like changing one by one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's definitely something you don't want to do by hand. So very easy to do via DTW. So just let us know.
Yeah, let us know,
Okay,
Stefan.
I'll call
You've got your support. You know, with the maintenance plan, you've got all you want to support. Like it's 30 minutes per topic. So if you have certain questions for support, don't send one email to the support desk and have them all in there because you might go over on your time. So what we suggest is send one email for each topic, so that way you know you'll get all your answers for each one without being billed on anything. It's free.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Well, enjoy your weekends, and I'll be sending out my invites for the next one on the 21st of April in that week. So in the meantime, thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye for now.